Hello, everyone, and welcome to Owlet. I'm very excited to bring you the first episode of our weekly community podcast, The Nest. I am, of course, your host, Mysfyt, but you can call me Nestfit. And we got a great show for you planned out today. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about season 3.9. Obviously, a decimal season. It's a little bit strange for some of you, so I want to explain a little bit about what it is and what we're doing that's different from our previous season. So, for those of you that don't know, Owlet started out as like a community tournament for low ranked players. It was originally just one division, a plat division in season 1. And in the later seasons, in season 2 and 3, we upped that to a minors and majors division. So we had a plat and a diamond division. And the way the format worked is we had 3 stages, just like early Overwatch League. And then there'd be stage playoffs and all that jazz. And then there'd be the playoffs at the end. But after season 3, Owlet actually shut down, and they weren't planning on coming back, but they ended up deciding to, which is, good for us. You get to see some more Owlet, which very, very enjoyable. So we had season 3.5, which was minors and majors format, just like that. But something we've always been asked for in Owlet is to have a masters division. Obviously, the goal of a community tournament is for the players to improve and get better. And with that, they're going to rank up and they're going to become ineligible for Owlet, but they still want to participate in Owlet. So we put on a masters division this season, which is Owlet season 3.9. And so this gives our players a chance who ranked up past the bounds for that typical, plat diamond division. It gives them a chance to get back into Owlet and play one more time. So I'm really excited about it. We got some great changes to the season. The main one that I'm excited for is we'll have double elimination playoffs for the first time, which I'm very excited for because I love that format. But yeah, without further ado, we can get into the Nest. So the things we're going to talk about on this episode, we're going to be going over, a little bit of preseason action. We'll be going over some talks of the meta. A new experimental patch was released today, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to go over power rankings and have a special surprise at the end that you're going to want to stay tuned for. But enough of that. Let's get into the show here. I am joined by Beek and Bowsy in the booth today, and I'm very, very excited for these guests. But, I don't think Owlet really knows you guys much anymore. Owlet's changed over the years, so even though Bowsy, you've been here for a bit, we may not know you as well anymore. And Beek, you're brand new to the scene. So, Beek, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself so we can get to know you better.
Yeah, thanks, Mysfyt. Yeah, so I've been around the Overwatch community for a couple of years now, really just kind of getting into the casting analyst role. Been in and around a couple different organizations, played at the 4.1 level as a tank and support. So I've kind of been there. I've been in those scrims, so I understand where people are coming from, especially now that we're getting into this Masters tournament where people are starting to scrim at that level. But as a caster, I've been casting for a couple different organizations, including the Bad Patch Amari League, a vast sub tournament, the Overwatch Tranquility community, Overwatch Championship Series, and a couple others like that. So I'm really excited to join Owlet for this season to cast as well as to be on the desk here sometimes at your leisure. There seems to be a lot of good storylines already that I'm excited to talk about, and it's only going to get better as we go throughout this season.
All right. Well, thank you for that. We're definitely happy to have you here. I look forward to seeing a few of your casts, and we'll throw it over to Bowsy now. You've been around the scene for a little bit now. I believe you were a player all the way back in season 2. But give us a little bit of introduction about yourself.
Well, Mysfyt, you're a little bit wrong about how long I've been in Owlet, but in terms of Overwatch, 2021 will be my 3rd year in the competitive Overwatch community for several different teams, playing for several different roles. In season 3, I started coming into Owlet when I was a caster in season 3. Season 3.5, I decided to be a player and a manager. I started off being the manager of Ina's Academy, which was an absolute train wreck, and we don't talk about it to this day. And then eventually, toward the end of the season, I ended up joining Talonfire for their postseason game against Velocity Force. However, it wasn't all for naught as we ended up going 1-3. Now I am a player for a team in Overwatch Tranquility Harmony tier, but I'm still going to occasionally be coming into Owlet for casting and other sort of business.
All right. Well, now that we got those out of the way, I would love to talk to you about preseason because we had some very, very exciting matches. A lot of 3-0s to go around, but we did have a very close one. Let's get on to that. So the first game that we had was Absolute Monstrosity versus Everfrost. And that game ended up going 3-0 with the way of Everfrost. And I'm curious to hear your opinions about it. So let's start with you, Bowsy. I kind of want to know what you think of Everfrost after seeing them take this game.
Everfrost, I feel like, does have a lot of strong things on this roster, but mainly goes to that DPS. Everfrost DPS duo and trio are really good so far. We saw a lot of big things from Blackstroke on that Widowmaker, and a lot of other players on Everfrost were able to make an impact in this match. But really, that looked like the only big thing on Everfrost. So it's interesting to see how Everfrost were able to take that 3-0, because really, you can see here, you can see Logan on that Kree and Keandre on the Hanzo during this match. They pretty much were able to dominate with only one death in the 2 maps for Logan. That's huge, especially as a DPS player. Excuse me. Your goal is to survive and be able to do as much kills and get enough damage as possible, and Logan did that perfectly in these matches.
All right, no, I definitely agree with that. I do think Everfrost is kind of they do kind of rely on that DPS do. I did see my own take on this match was I felt like Everfrost didn't really play that well as a team. It felt like their coordination it had some holes in it. They definitely could have played better there. They had some very, very sloppy engages when they were running the ball state comp or the off tank comp rather. But I do think that they have a lot of strong parts. I do think their DPS played very, very well in this match. But I'm curious to know how their coordination is going to hold up once they go against some of the other teams in this division. But I want to hear what you think about it too, Beek. What were your opinions on this game?
Yeah, this was one of the first games I watched as part of this Owlet tournament, especially in the preseason. The biggest thing that I noticed right off the bat was neither team played Echo whatsoever in this match. And when you start map 1 and control, there's certain points in certain control maps that don't lend themselves to Echo, and I understand that, right? I guess, but Echo is still totally broken, especially with a Mercy pocket.
Very true.
And we're gonna get into the patch notes later, so we're gonna talk a little bit more about Echo and what she looks like in the future. But it was really odd that neither of them even ran Echo or Mercy in the other maps they played, right? So they played on Rialto and Blizzard World with none of Echo being played, which I was really surprised about. But I mean, hey, if it worked for Everfrost, maybe they're experimenting with little things. Absolute Monstrosity seems to have a little bit of a dependency on a double shield comp, and I understand that this took place a couple days ago, so maybe they're still experimenting with the patch notes of old, right? So you're kind of still trying to feel out if Sigma's still viable, and if not viable, maybe you do pair that Sigma with the Orisa, with a couple different other damage dealers, like McCree's still really strong, Hanzo's still really strong. Obviously, he got that buff, but really just got run over by Everfrost. I mean, like you said, they kind of didn't always play as a team, or so they were kind of picking some of their comfort heroes. But their Winston dive actually gave Absolute Monstrosity a lot of trouble, especially on that Blizzard world, to the point where they never really punished. I think it was what's his face, Golden Crow on the Winston. Never really died at all. He took a lot of damage, farmed a lot of Primal Rages, and was able to get a nano as well. They never really had an answer for that. So
Yeah.
I think Absolute Monstrosity has to figure something out in terms of a comp that they want to run, because I don't know if Double Shield is going to be something that might be viable, at least in those long-term maps, because dive seems so strong right now.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of casting this game, and that was something that I took away from this. Is they kind of shot themselves in the foot with the comps they played.
Yeah.
Absolute Monstrosity picked some comps that just didn't give them the resources to succeed against the comps that Everfrost were running. Another thing I wanted to point out is I did see some points where it felt like players on Absolute Monstrosity didn't really know what their role was. I'm not going to name names because the goal of this podcast is to call people out and make them feel bad. But there was a specific moment on Blizzard World where a player kind of was going back and forth between point and the fight on high ground where his team was. because it didn't seem like he knew where he needed to be. And that's something that I think, that's something that can get solved with coaching. All it takes is someone taking from a third person perspective and being like, yo, you're supposed to be here right now. And then boom, they don't do it anymore. But that's definitely, I think Absolute Monstrosity needs to get some coaching because they looked very, very sloppy in this game. I think they have some good points on them. Obviously, my former teammate, Hoopa57, is a very, very solid player that we saw that in his match against Council of Anime Girls that we'll talk about here in a little bit. I think he is a very, very big bright spot on this roster. I had a chance to talk with him after his game against Council of Anime Girls, and he said that this team is really focusing on getting their synergy together right now. So Absolute Monstrosity, definitely not as good as they can be right now. I definitely expect to see them improve as the course of the season goes on. But yeah, they did not have a very good performance in this first match. But, it is just preseason, doesn't affect the record too much. So let's get into our next match here, which was Council of Anime Girls versus SpongeBob Mac and Cheese. And I have to say, those are two of the most unique names I have seen during my time in the Overwatch community. You got to give them props for that. But Council of Anime Girls definitely had the driver's seat for this one, taking it 3-0 over SpongeBob Mac and Cheese. Something I do want to point out about this match is that this was not actually even Council of Anime Girls' real roster. Sempra played flex sport the whole time. And he is not a flex sport player, as you probably saw from him feeding his brains out. He's a flex DPS player, and a pretty good one at that. I will give him props for that. But Council of Anime Girls was able to take this one pretty easily over SpongeBob Mac and Cheese. I'd like to hear your guys' opinions about it. Even with the ringers, they were able to stomp. Let's start off with you, Beek, since we started off with Bowsy on the last one. What did you feel when you watched this game?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of a curious. I was trying to figure out what exactly SpongeBob Mac and Cheese wanted to do, and I told you guys I had some opinions on them because I watched this one. I had some notes. They were playing relatively meta comps for the most of the game. Chuzzle had great impact on Farah for playing on that lead gen control. Nikolai was playing Hog, which was an interesting choice, and I think they were able to adapt. They had some initial trouble with it, but were able to use it over a while. And then Bob Guy played really well on that Echo. And then of course, not tier 2 was playing, I think, lights out on that ball as well. But really interesting that I watched their next game, and we'll talk about that soon. But I don't really know the roles of the players on SpongeBob Mac and Cheese, because we see Jack was playing a DPS role in this game, in this match. But in another match, he was playing healer and tank as well, I think, at one point. So I'm curious as to if they have defined roles. Maybe they're a team that just wants to play whatever they feel like, or maybe they have certain strengths across their hero pools that kind of intersect. So I was thinking it was rather interesting. I mean, SpongeBob Mac and Cheese was trying to run Brawl on Eichenwald at one point. And on first point, that's fine, right? I think you can get away with that. But then after you get that second point where the streets phase, where it's a lot more open, there's high ground that you have to take. And unless you're being very strict with how you are positioning against the comp that Council of Anime Girls was running, which is more of like a ball Sigma type of composition, if I remember, that's going to be really hard to pull off, right? So they struggled a little bit on that streets phase. That of course was a little bit too little too late by the time they switched off of that. But I mean, I think Council of Anime Girls was just a little bit better when it mattered, especially in those winning fights towards the end.
All right. I think that's a pretty good assessment. I'd like to hear what you think, Bowsy. I know you had some opinions on this one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the big things I'm noticing when I look at the score line, look at how close it was. 2-1, 3-2, 3-2. So obviously, Council of Anime Girls almost got away with this from the skin of their teeth, and SpongeBob Mac and Cheese did put up a fight. So I don't think it's safe to say that Council of Anime Girls were able to sweep this game. It was not an easy task. They had to really fight tooth and nail to be able to take this victory over SpongeBob Mac and Cheese. I think the biggest strong point with Council of Anime Girls, however, is their DPS line and the amount of raw skill you see out of these players. Hawk, Bob Guy, Blatman, even Sempra, all of them are extremely mechanically skilled and are able to carry fights on their backs like they're giant Reinhardts with giant saddles on top of them. It's really amazing how Council of Anime Girls' raw skill can be able to transition to that. That being said, however, SpongeBob Mac and Cheese did bring it close, and I feel like they have a big potential to make sort of upsets in this league. I think SpongeBob Mac and Cheese is definitely the team you have to watch out for this entire season, especially that DPS line. Chuzzle on that Farah is an absolute monster, and you do not want to get that under your radar.
All right. Well, I think that's a very bold prediction, personally. My takeaway from this game, I think Coag only had this one close because of the ringers. I was formerly the coach of this team. I had to end up leaving it in order to be eligible for the Nestes position for Owlet, which was very, very unfortunate, but a necessary sacrifice in my eyes. And I agree with your assessment that Coag does have a lot of mechanical skill. You mentioned players Hawk, Blatman. not tier 2, also known as Alcura. Very, very talented players all around. And you will see, especially Hawk, will be a name that you can't get out of your head this season. Very, very talented DPS player. I've had the pleasure of playing with him for almost a year now as a teammate, and he's a lights out DPS player. It's really hard to gauge his actual skill when playing with him because he'll, in ranked, he's only like, he was diving for the longest time, didn't really peak in the Masters. He's finally gotten to 3.7. But I've seen this guy just absolutely dominate Grandmaster players. He has a knack for winning his 1v1s. He has a knack for always being in the right spot. He's an unreasonably smart player. Like, he doesn't talk very much, but he always knows what the right thing to do is. When he does talk, he's always right. So very, very good player to have on this roster. Something I want to point out, though, about Council of Anime Girls, they have a ton of mechanical skill, but they don't talk to each other very much. Their comm structure is still, getting work on it. So I think that is going to be something that we have to keep an eye on. I think they will out mechanic most of the teams in this league just because of the raw skill they have. And especially because we're currently in a meta that goes to their skills, not tier 2, is a very, very talented ball player. Doesn't really play too much else. They do have other tanks. So,
Look at you, got the secret strats by coaching this team. You know exactly all of them in and out.
Yeah, and I was worried that people were going to think I'm biased, but I'm going to be completely honest about these guys. I don't see them being a top team in the division. I think they'll be kind of that upper mid tier. I think they have the potential to get into that top tier, but I think they need to iron out their kinks. Luckily for them, though, they do have another former teammate of mine in the coaching position, which is going to be Pit Pat, and that guy's a great coach. So I think we can definitely see this team improve as we go along here. But we'll get into our next match here. Our next match is going to be Council of Anime Girls again, and this time they got to play with their actual roster against Absolute Monstrosity. So we'll throw it over to that. And yeah, we'll same format. I'll start off with you, Bowsy. What did you think about this game?
Let's just make it clear. Coag with their actual roster looked very scary against Absolute Monstrosity. I did not see a lot of big things from Absolute Monstrosity. The only real star of the show I felt like was Hoopa in that match. Nobody else on Absolute Monstrosity really could step up to the plate, in my opinion. Like, you could see some moments here or there, like of course Epic Gamer on that Tracer and Donut Puncher on the Anna and Bap. But other than that, there really weren't a lot of big moments I could find from Absolute Monstrosity in that match. So really, I think Absolute Monstrosity really just kind of got outskilled in this match against Council of Anime Girls. That's not saying that they're bad. It's just saying that they need to work obviously on that sort of skill if they're going to find any success about this team. And Council of Anime Girls just swept the floor, and especially on some of those later maps, they were just disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is what I'm saying about Coag. I think Coag, in my opinion, is going to be a team that beats everybody worse than them and loses to everyone better than them. Because of how mechanically skilled they are. You saw in this game, I don't think Absolute Monstrosity can hold candles to them mechanically, other than Hoopa, like you said. I'm sure most of Owlet has seen that double flux cancel now, which is a very, very exceptional play. Hoopa, I have to say, is one of my favorite teammates of all time. Very driven player, very smart player, always has drive to get better, and is a very, very talented player. And I mentioned on the last time we talked about Absolute Monstrosity, he's a very, very good bright spot for this team. But we'll throw it over to Beek now. What did you see in this game?
Yeah, I had a similar impression as you did. I mean, the sense that we have a player named Epic Gamer on Absolute Monstrosity, but I think the Epic Gamers were on Council of Anime Girls in this match. I mean, all you have to do is look at the stats here that kind of tells the whole story, right? I mean, you have 359 eliminations and only 60 deaths over 3 maps. And think about you're taking turns, of course, on those attacks. That's a lot of sustain. You're not really getting much out of Absolute Monstrosity here. And I mean, to be an analyst about it, let me put it in the technical term. That's just a team diff, I think, in the sense that there really wasn't much that Absolute Monstrosity had to answer for Coag here. And like you said, I think you can, even if they aren't the most, I think, well coordinated team, let's just say that, especially not being able to in the comm structures, as you mentioned, just being able to outmuscle them with that mechanical ability is enough to get you through some of the teams like Absolute Monstrosity as it is now. Of course, everything could change.
All right. Well, that about does it for this match. We can throw it over to the next one now, which is going to be SpongeBob Mac and Cheese versus Everfrost. We did not, unfortunately, get to produce this game. We did get Silent Marine able to stream the replay codes, and this one was easily the closest game of preseason. And a bit of a not what we would have expected based on how the other matches played out. Everfrost actually dropped this to SpongeBob Mac and Cheese. When I personally saw the initial matches, Everfrost versus Absolute Monstrosity and Council versus SpongeBob, I thought Council and Everfrost were pretty close to each other. I thought my personal take on it was that Everfrost was a worse version of Coag. Coag had more mechanical skill, but had the similar, holes in their coordination. So I expected Everfrost to be able to take this one, but I was actually very, very surprised to find out that SpongeBob Mac and Cheese had taken it 3-2 over Everfrost. So I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts on this game. We'll start off with you, Beek. I'd love to know what you thought about this.
Yeah, I was actually watching this VOD during the day today, and a wild game. I mean, super entertaining. The fact that they tied on Temple of Anubis is just, you always love to see that. Everyone loves 2CP maps, but this is where I was talking about a couple of matches ago. I was actually checking past VODs with SpongeBob, or trying to find, or like going back in the VOD to see, like, wait, was Jack playing this character? I thought he was playing this character. Like, Jack was on Ball at one point. And then he plays Anna on Dorado. Deadly Pants was on Rhine, and then he was on support for the next map. Like, I was super curious, as I guess there seems to be no defined roles for SpongeBob Mac and Cheese. And I mean, clearly it's working for them. They won some of the maps that they were changing all those different, roles and definitions for them. Everfrost was pretty dominant on the first map. So at that point, I was like, okay, maybe Everfrost can be able to bring this back and get a pretty clean sweep like the rest of our games, but that wasn't the case. They really had a chance to kind of take control of the series, Everfrost did, on that escort map in Dorado, because they finished with, I think, over 3 minutes of time on their attack. And SpongeBob, they successfully defended them, the fact that they only had, they successfully passed all three objectives, but with no time. So they were in a great position to win that map, but then they allow SpongeBob Mac and Cheese to get a pretty significant push in that overtime. And then just SpongeBob mounts a pretty Herculean defense on that point A over that arch chokeway, and Everfrost had no answers for it. So I was really curious at that point. I'm like, okay, now it's a match, and SpongeBob just kind of grinded it out longer than Everfrost possibly could.
All right, Bowsy, what about you? What do you think?
So, of course, Beek mentioned that they were continually switching the roles with the main tank, main support, and all these sort of roles. I think that sort of relates to the sort of idea that maybe SpongeBob Mac and Cheese might be able to prosper by causing chaos in the sort of predictions. When you prepare for a team, you obviously want to try to look at specific pieces. But if a team decides to switch up those pieces just like that, same players but a different roster and different like roles that everyone's playing, you're not prepared for that. You can't possibly be prepared for that. And I think that's how SpongeBob Mac and Cheese was able to take this away. Not to mention, I think SpongeBob Mac and Cheese is definitely more coordinated together as a team than Everfrost. Because we mentioned when we were talking about Everfrost versus Absolute Monstrosity, their DPS seems to really be the stars of the show. But when they played against SpongeBob Mac and Cheese, they obviously, those DPS couldn't do a lot because SpongeBob Mac and Cheese was much more coordinated than Absolute Monstrosity and was able to make more of an impact overall and be able to bring Everfrost to these 6 maps. So I definitely feel like Everfrost might have struggles if they get into a team that's definitely more coordinated, because then they'll have to try and figure out how to get those DPS to get value, or they need to try and work on coordination themselves. But for SpongeBob Mac and Cheese, definitely interesting how they're able to switch up their roles constantly on the fly and still be able to replicate the same amount of results.
All right. Well, that just about does it for our preseason recap here. That'll be, those were all the games. We only got to get 4 there. So now we can get into a little bit more of our meta discussion. For those of you unaware, there was a new experimental patch that was released today that nerfed Echo, Tracer, and Zen. This is coming off the back of just a week ago getting those Ball and Sigma nerfs. So I want to talk a little bit about those with you guys. We'll go over all the changes now. Just so they're out there. Ash got her damage nerf, which touched her threshold. She can no longer one-shot squishies with damage boost, but she got a recovery buff to compensate so she can shoot faster. Hanzo's Storm Arrow got a recovery buff, so it shoots a lot faster now. It's kind of a machine gun. Might need to take a look at that in a couple of patches, but we'll see. Right now, it's not that big of an issue. Sig Shield redeploy was increased from 1 second to 2.5 seconds, which is a pretty big change. And then Ball Shields only give 75 per target instead of the typical 100. That was the last patch, right? That was the patch that we have been playing on for preseason. Those were new changes for that one. But then we got into the patch today, and this touches 3 very, very meta characters, Echo, Zen, and Tracer. And I think the Echo changes aren't too much. They nerfed her ammo. She only has 12 shots instead of 15 now. And her focusing beam only lasts for 2 seconds instead of 2.5. Don't really think that hurts the character that much. Just makes her a little bit weaker, slightly less uptime. Tracer's fall off, if you remember, she got her change from 12 to 20 meters to 13 to 23 meters. I think way back in Double Shield, or it might have even been during Goats. It was a long time ago they buffed her. And it didn't really have that much of an impact. We didn't hear much about it, and now they are bringing that back down. So she will have to be a bit closer to do meaningful damage. No more Tracer 76 of her poking you down from afar, getting you to half, and then coming in and finishing off the kill. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that one in a little bit. And then the other one, which I think is the big change here. Zen's abilities now apply slower. So Harmony and Discord now get on their target slower. I personally thought they were instant before, but evidently there was a travel time between applying the orb to someone and it actually getting on them. So yeah, we have our changes now shown on screen. Discord also got that nerf from 30 to 25, which I actually think is the big one, because if you remember, they touched his primary fire orbs. They touched that damage when they buffed Discord, so that the damage would be the same as before they nerfed it, but they didn't redo that change. So Zen's orbs do less damage than I'm saying this really, really poorly right now, but Zen's orbs basically do less damage than they originally did way back like a couple years ago, which I think is going to be a very, very impactful change. So yeah, I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts on this. Where does this leave us in this, Sigma Ball, Echo Tracer, Mercy Zen meta? Where does this leave us now? What's going to be meta going forward?
Yeah, so I'll take it with the first. Let's take it in two different patch notes, right? Because we want to talk about the first one and then what has precipitated the second patch notes as well. The first patch notes where they got rid of the Sigma cooldown, which made it his juggling the shield a little more janky, and then the change to Hanzo and Ashe, which not exactly warranted in my opinion, was basically like the screw tanks patch. I mean, I don't know what roles you guys play, but at that point, it was the only tanks that are playable is Ball, because he might be able to survive more than any of the others. And then at that point, it's just a question of who you going to pair with that Ball to play. So we saw a lot of like double bubble. We saw Ball with like the Zarya, and sometimes with Hog, depending on the map. So I'm really curious now. And I think, of course, the entire community was crying out, like, if you're trying to delete the tank position and the people who play that position, then you're doing a good job of it, Blizzard. But now I think the patch notes that came out today, timely enough, are great. I think that's a really good progress to being a little more balanced, not having like one composition characters that are overtuned. I still think they should touch Ball a little bit more, but I think the Echo changes are going to be effective, but not make her weak, because she's one of those characters that if you nerf her too much, she'll be useless, right? Especially regarded to hit scans that are going to be way more powerful than her. So I think focusing on the Echo Beam, lowering the DPS with the reload time is going to be really important. And like you said, everything revolves around that Zed Discord Orb, right? You just get blown up as a tank with that 30% Discord Orb on you, especially if you're playing Winston or any other type of squishy tank, or if you try and Fire Strike as a Rhine, you just get deleted.
Yeah.
So that'll be really important. I'm really curious about that cast time, like you were talking about, to like throwing the orbs, throwing the Discord Orb. That's something I think everyone kind of took for granted. So I'm curious to see how that will change with Zen. I actually think he'll still be relevant on some maps, but Brig, I think, will still be able to come back in the meta. I don't think Lucio is going to be good still. I think they need to make some changes to him before like a true brawl comp type of composition is going to be able to rise at the highest levels. But you never know. I mean, people can get away with anything they want. And, we talk about theory crafting here. But once you get into a lobby and if you have, a one-trick Lucio that's just a god, you never know, that they can try and make that work. So we'll see here. But I like the progress that we've made so far on this patch notes. And I'm excited to see what meta actually arises from this, if at all. I mean, I still think will change some of the support line. I still think a lot of the DPS healers that are being played right now are still really overtuned. But at least maybe the tanks will survive a little bit longer now. We'll see.
Potentially. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Exactly.
want to build off that a little bit in terms of like what I think these changes mean. I think, I personally try to separate changes into like macro and micro changes. Like, does this change the way the comp plays, or does this change just the way the character plays, right? And typically the macro changes come in the take category, because obviously tanks decide most of the macro. Like, the engages are focused on the tanks, so that's just kind of how it goes. And I think in the last patch, the Sigma and the ball changes. I don't think the ball change at all affects how he plays. It just makes him a little bit worse. He engages the exact same way. He just can't survive as long. And I think it didn't really affect the way that comp changes. The big one was, of course, that Sigma change, because now he can't just have that shield out all the time. It makes him a lot harder when he wants to aggress. because if he puts that shield out and messes it up, or it gets broken really fast, he's got to wait a long time to put it back out. It forces him to use his cooldowns faster, so that kind of brought Sigma out. We saw Zarya get played a little bit more at those higher levels. I think in this new Echo changes really are going to affect her place in the meta in the comp. I think she's still really, really good. She's just like slightly less forgiving, right? Like to really use focusing beam, like you're going to kill someone really fast anyway. You don't need 2.5 seconds to kill someone. What that does is it makes it a little easier on those tanks. Especially like the example I thought of was Reinhardt. When you get him, he is half and his shield is half. You put that focusing beam on him, you'll do significantly less damage because it will only be there for 2 seconds.
I was actually thinking a Hog. I was thinking like Hog might
Hog's a good
survive a
one,
little
too.
bit longer now that he won't have the full 2.5 seconds of a focusing beam on, his giant belly when he's trying to take a breather and walk away and hide behind cover. No, I totally agree.
That's a big one. I think I don't really think these changes really affect. I still think we're going to see the ball changes be really good. I do think that the Zen Discord nerf is a really, really actually big buff to the current comp right now. I know that might seem strange because Zen has played in it, but if you think about it, we just nerfed ball survivability. And one of the things that allowed Ball to die like really fast, the two characters that can chase Ball really easily are Echo and Tracer, right? They're the ones who can chase him down when he makes a mistake and punish him with that Discord on him. Discord is less now, and Tracer has more fall off, and Focusing Beam lasts a shorter amount of time. So now Ball is actually more survivable on this patch than he was on the last patch. So I don't actually think this is going to change the meta. I think we're still going to see. I don't know like exactly what we're going to see from the support category. I think Mercy Zen might still be good. It might be something else.
I think a Mercy Brig will definitely be Brig will be back in, right? Because
Mercy Brig could be fine.
Brig will definitely probably be back in those close quarter matches or like those close quarter maps that you were able to like not have that sort of free room to explore or be able to do any of that. And I do feel like the Echo changes don't change a lot of things, and I definitely do feel like it makes it easier for tanks because when they nerfed the Sigma shield to 3 seconds, it made Sigma more clunkier to play and harder to face off against Echoes in many people's opinions, especially pros. So now that you have Echo having that focusing beam nerf, it ain't perfect, but it's going to at least be something to make it so that Sigma can deal with an Echo a little bit more. So I feel like the meta will be staying pretty much the same. Apart from maybe a support change, we could be seeing Brig come back in. We could still be seeing Zen on some maps. We could even see some wacky support compositions like, who knows, maybe Mercy or maybe an Anna will come back into the composition, but Anna is the one that literally is a terrible support right now. So we'll have to see how the meta really goes into it.
I do think Anna does have her spots. I do watch a lot of Natter. Natter's a accomplished contenders coach, and he actually said he thinks Mercy Anna is a viable support duo. Even on last patch before he got this experimental change, she does have her places where she's really good, especially against teams that run like the hog ball compositions. Because I think hog ball is a viable thing again. I don't think Sigma is the number one off tank anymore to pair with ball. I think we've seen teams even running Zarya. I think Zarya, D.Va, and Hog all have their places with that on certain maps. D.Va contributes to the dive. Zarya helps against the enemy ball because he can't boot people with bubbles, or at least he can't slam them up with his pile drive. And then, of course, Hog is just Hog. He helps you get more kills. He's a really tanky, damage soaky character, very survivable on his own, can play those off angles really well. So I think this definitely opens up the we're going to see a lot more variety in the meta, but I do think we are going to still see the double off tank ball and something else.
And I know you talked about that it'll help Ryan with the survivability with that Discord being down, but I think it'll actually help Winston even more. Like I casted a tournament this weekend. It was a bunch of like tier 3, tier 2 teams. They were running a lot of Winston Zarya dive with like a Tracer Echo. So there's so many win conditions ahead there between grab pulse. You can copy someone else to do it your own grab. You have the cleave from the Winston, the protection of the bubble, with that Zen, of course, on the back line. That'll only enable that, I think, even more. And the fact that Echo is still going to be pretty good, especially with that Mercy pocket, is going to be only good things for Winston. So, hey, Winston mains out there, you can rejoice. Maybe he might be back. No. Of course, unless there's like a hog on the field there, you never know. But
I can see double bubble though, for sure.
Yeah,
double bubble is definitely a very, very decent strategy. And I think you mentioned the Discord changes. I definitely think that will allow him to survive a bit better. So I think that could be a possibility. We'll have to see how it goes with ball. I think it will be map dependent. There are maps where Winston's better. There's maps where ball's better. So again, I think it will be variety, and I still think it will be double off tank. But I think double bubble does have a spot. Actually, I think you're right on that.
Yeah, Double Bubble, I definitely feel like could be returning into the meta just because of that sort of impact for Winston now being able to jump into the enemy line and get killed within 3 seconds flat. Roasted monkey, please. But regardless, I feel like Double Bubble can definitely be helpful. I mean, we could be seeing the return of Ball Diva into the meta, Ball Zarya. We could be seeing pretty much anything right now. Anything goes right now. And considering Overwatch League isn't in season for the next 3 months, we won't know what the pros are going to be running pretty much
And I
as
want to
far as
underscore something like Diva got that buff with the armor changes, and I think that just
Right.
kind of like went under the wayside because like she wasn't being played right now, and it was Ball Sigma all day long. That's actually a subtly massive change, and I think she's going to be really strong. I think depending on where they make some other changes, but she's still pretty good. I mean, even like some of the teams this weekend were running Winston Diva, and like it enables her to be able to use her boosters to be in a more offensive position without having to give up all of the armor. And that actually prevents her from getting, melted by that echo focusing beam a
Yeah.
little bit slower, right? So I think that Diva change is actually a pretty subtle one, but is massive. So I think we might see some teams change that Zarya to Diva if they're playing like that double bubble, depending on the map geography that they're going to be, and of course with the enemy, what the enemy comp is running too, right? So if they're getting a really heavy spam, that a bubble just won't sustain, then they might elect to go with that Diva with the
Yeah.
defense matrix will be way better.
I think personally, so I agree with what we've talked about here. I think the last thing that I want to end off on is I think if you want Echo to be worse, Echo's a cycle character like Doomfist, right? She kind of uses all her cooldowns, waits for them to reset before she engages, type thing. She usually uses all her cooldowns like within a couple of seconds of each other or a couple of moments. You don't really see her like stickies, then wait, then focusing beam. It's kind of like you throw stickies with damage boost, and then you focusing beam
Yeah,
to kill
all
something.
all
It's really
spammy,
yeah,
fast.
spammy
yeah,
spams.
that's exactly as a tank player who sometimes play
Yeah.
DPS on the side. That is exactly how I play with him.
Yeah.
Exactly how I play Echo.
And I think if you actually want to change Echo's power level, I don't think you actually need to change her damage numbers. I think she's fine to be doing that much damage, but she has so much uptime right now. I've said this in our Discord, in the Owlet Discord, and I'll say it again here. I think if you really want to change Echo's power, like you can take the damage numbers out of it. That's a bad way to do it, but I think that just hurts the character. I think the really way you should do it is make her way less forgiving. Add like 2 or 3 seconds to all of her cooldowns. Make her have to like actually think about how she uses them. Because right now, you can kind of just like sit on an off angle and just like choose when you want to go in. You get those stickies back so quick. It's like a 6-second cooldown. That's so much damage for a 6-second cooldown. That's like 180. It's a one shot if you get all of them with a Mercy boost, which of course, if you're playing Mercy correctly, you should be always boosting your Echo when she has her cooldowns because you want that extra damage. Like, I think if they really want to get Echo out of meta, I don't think these changes are enough. I think they need to touch her cooldown times if they want to have a chance at it. I don't think damage numbers is the way to go. That just takes power out of the character. I think the character is fine to have a lot of damage. Just don't make it so they have a lot of damage all of the time.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like it's like similar with Ashe. Like they nerfed Ashe's damage just so she couldn't headshot anyone and get a kill with a damage boost with Mercy. Honestly, I feel like that was the wrong option. They should just nerf the damage boost for Mercy because it was just a bit easier. So now we're in a situation where again Echo can be damage boosted by Mercy and be able to kill someone easily. So
Yeah.
it's just an interesting situation that we're in right now.
It's a tenuous one, I think, at best, because when you run the Echo, especially if you're talking about kind of nerfing her damage numbers, which I agree you shouldn't do, because odds are you always have to run that Echo with a Mercy pocket, right? Because odds are one of the other teams is running a hit scan like a McCree or like an Ashe, and if you don't have that pocket with the Echo, I mean, it's kind of a free kill sometimes, especially like if they're not just diving you 100% of the time. But she's such a dependent character, like a Pharah, on that Mercy pocket. So if you make her too bad, then she's never going to have that uptime to be up, and it's never going to be worth it to pocket her, and then it'll just rotate away from her entirely in the meta composition. So she's a very hard character to balance, I think, in that regard. So she's either like way too strong and just a little or overtuned like she is now, or she's terrible and you'd rather just run like a Reaper and press W into someone's face because a little more brawly of a composition. So we'll see what happens, but yeah, it's very careful. It's why all of this patch notes and all the different adjustments is so difficult, and why the Blizz devs have a hard job that we like the backseat drive on them.
Yeah, we really do. I'm very curious. I can't wait to see what the meta settles to. I hope I'm wrong. I think we've had the Sigma Ball, or not. Obviously, it's not Sigma Ball, but double off tank comp. I don't think Sigma Ball exactly, but you get what I mean. Like double off tank, still that thing. I would like to see some changes come in. I think we're due for a meta change here. I'd like to see some shakeup in the meta. But I think we've talked a lot about the meta here, and I want to get back onto Owlet. I want to talk about our power rankings. Each of us made our own power rankings, and I'd like to discuss them before we head out here. So I'll start actually with my own power rankings because I would like to talk about them. I will go from the bottom to the top. I have 3 tiers. I have the tier for the contenders. These are the teams that I think will be in contention for winning the league. I have my mid tier, and then I have my teams that I don't think are contenders. Right? So
I thought you were saying these guys are going to contenders next year, right? They're on the.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Are you kidding me? A bunch of 3.7 players? Yeah. Well, I mean, given the state of the Overwatch scene, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, but we'll start off in the not contenders tier. I have absolute monstrosity in the bottom right now, and this just comes down to they just didn't look that good in preseason. That's all I have to go off of right now. So this can change. Maybe they beat some of the other teams in this tier and they look a lot better. I mentioned Tupa already. I think he's a very good player, and I think with coaching, this team can definitely improve a lot. So keep an eye on them. I don't think they'll be bottom 1 forever. And I do expect to see them improve. But for now, I have to put them bottom 1, given the way they performed at Preseason, not being able to take a map. Next up, we have Barbecue Dad. And I want to make it very clear that this is in no way a grudge. I know people know my team lost to this team in 3.5 finals. I want to make it very clear that this has nothing to do with that. And it has everything to do with the fact that Gerbert and Xylesia, which were 2 of the players on that championship roster, are now off the team. This team, even with those players, didn't perform too great in the GGNA Intermediate Division, which is a Diamond Division. This is a Masters tournament, so not performing in a Diamond Division doesn't really bode well for them. They don't scrim very often, so I think they, I like these guys. I have friends on this team, Clutch, High Quality, Hyper Knight, love all those guys, but I don't see them being too great in this league. I think they'll win some games, especially off the back of McNewbie just being an absolute nut. He's their hit scan player, and the dude's cracked. He won our Widow 1v1 tournament against a 4.1 player last year, and I've heard that he's gone even with contenders Widows in France Community Cup. The guy's just crazy. What can you say? He's a former CSGO player, obviously very cracked. So I'm excited to see what he does this season, but I don't expect the team to do too well in the regular season. Next up, we have Chinese Monsoon. This team has good players, namely Poplots. I'm sure you guys will all recognize that name from Season 3. Very, very talented player. He was our Minors MVP. And he's played in South American Contenders Gauntlet. He's a crazy player. But this team hasn't scrimmed above 3.4K yet. So they're not ready for the types of teams they'll be facing in these mid and contenders tiers. So I have to see more of them before I'm able to put them higher. That's my only concern for them. Next up, we have Everfrost, who, again, I just think they're a worse version of Coag. Good DPS, but their coordination is just not there. I don't expect them to do too well until they get that sorted out. We have SpongeBob Mac and Cheese, who I'm putting above Everfrost, even though I think Everfrost might end up being a better team in the regular season because they beat them. I currently can't justify a placement of Everfrost above SpongeBob since they won the head-to-head. But yeah, that's just about wraps it up for my not contenders tiers. This is subject to change. Obviously, these teams can prove me wrong and move up. But for right now, I don't expect any of these teams to be big contenders in Owlet Season 3.9. So next we'll move up to our mid tier, which I only have 1 team in. And I know these guys are going to be disappointed that I didn't put them in top tier, but I have to put Council of Anime Girls in this tier for now. And this is a similar reason to the reason I put for Chinese Monsoon. The teams in the contenders tiers all scrim 3.9 to 4K. That's their scrim range, right? That's a lot higher than the 3.6 to 3.7 range that Council of Anime Girls has scrimmed at. And I know that just because I've been stalking them since I left the team. That's where they've been scrimming. They have been going higher recently, so this may be some change. I don't know how those scrims have been going for them. But I think it comes down to, again, they're mechanical nuts. Every single one of them is good mechanically, and this is throughout the roster, right? In not tier 2, Blatman, Reed, Sempra, Bob Guy, Hawk, all of them, right? Even in the support category, Clown Dog and Mushroom, both crazy mechanical players. But they all just have issues in the macro gameplay, right? That I'm not going to go through all their issues because that would just be disrespectful to them. But each one of them has a big macro issue that they need to get fixed, right? And until Pitpack can get to them, I don't see them breaking into that contenders tier. I think they definitely will be a team that upsets some contenders tier teams over the course of the season. They have the skill to do it, but they need the coaching right now if they want to be on the level of the teams in the contenders tier. So, obviously this is a team that I'm cheering for. I have a lot of friends on this team. I want to see them do well, but right now I can't put them any higher. And then we get into my contenders tier, which strangely is actually the only tier that I didn't order. And that's because I don't know enough about these teams. We'll start off with Monarchy. I know they come from Altitude, but I know nothing about them other than the fact that they're a 3.3 team that scrims 3.9. So, I think they're going to be one of those teams that's people underestimate them a lot because they look bad on paper, but they're actually going to do really, really well. I would assume they have really good coordination. I don't know because I haven't seen them play yet. Really excited to do that. Next up, we have Cats with Hats, which is from that League Zero Horizon League type area. Recently lost one of their players, so they might actually drop out of this tier. But they have a very, very high scrim range as well. Very, very good SR average. I expect them to be a pretty solid team. And next up, we have the team that I actually think is going to win the tournament, which is Blues Clues Bandits. They were in GGNA. My team, Bench Boys, went against them, and they were one of the only teams that gave us trouble while we were still scrimming during the GGNA. For those of you that don't know, Bench Boys unfortunately had to kind of quit GGNA because we had a lot of availability issues towards the end, which was really unfortunate. We actually beat the team that won the division, so we might have been able to win it all. But these things happen, and now Bench Boys is they're gone. Sad. But Blues Clues Bandits was a very, very solid team, and I expect them to keep that up in this division. I'm really excited to see what they do here. I really liked playing against that team. They were one of the only teams. It was just a really, really good match. They played that. It was during the Somber Reaper. It was during the meta change of the Somber Reaper Brawl meta to the Sigma Ball meta. We were playing Sigma Ball the whole time. They were playing Somber Reaper the whole time. And it was just a really, really solid match all the way through. And I really enjoyed playing against them. I'm really excited to see what they do here. And then, of course, we have Storybook Villains, who is known around Owlet. They were a very, very solid team in seasons 1 and 2, or seasons 2 and 3, excuse me. And then they had a bit of a hiatus, and now they're back. It's going to be a lot of old players. They're just a roster that's recently come together. It's a bunch of old SBV players and a couple friends. And they're all like very, very high ranked players, very high skill players. But something I want to point out though, the reason I didn't put them at the number, I guess right here, they're the number 1 spot, but like obviously this tier is not ordered. The reason I don't think they are the number 1 team is because I've heard rumors that they are not planning to take this tournament seriously. They plan to play it on comfort picks and characters they enjoy and just win out because they are that much higher ranked than other players in this tournament. They are all like 3.9 players, which is higher than any other team. But the thing that I want to point out about this, and this might come off as a little disrespectful, I mean it in no such way. SBV has a very, very egotistical hit scan player in Brutalone 23 or Brutal 123. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think to be a hit scan player, you need to have some semblance of an ego in order to take duels and such. But I know for a fact that this dude is not a guy who likes to lose. So I think SBV is going to mess around and meme until they start getting beat. And then I think they're going to turn on the gas and really put it together. And that's when I think they're actually going to be a top team in this division. Before they do that, I don't expect them to be a team that's going to do that well. I don't think they are good enough to meme on this tournament. I think they will have to try if they want to be a top team, but I think they definitely can be a top team. It just depends on whether or not they actually stick to that whole, we're going to play comfort picks type thing. So yeah, that's my power rankings. And the thing I'm going to leave off on is if you didn't like what I said about your team, just prove me wrong. These are preseason power rankings. I don't know a lot about most of these teams, and I don't mean any of this disrespectfully. If I got something wrong here, I am happy to change my opinion. Just go out in your games this weekend and prove me wrong. Make me look stupid. That's all I ask.
Wow. Yeah. Big leaks if true by Mysfyt here. All right. So I'll go to mine here. And I did the same type of approach with Mysfyt as with a tiered approach, but I named mine a little bit differently than his. So I'll start from top to bottom as he went bottom to top. I'll start with that top tier. So Storybook Villains, we just heard a little diatribe about them. Of course, you can't not take into account the mechanical ability and the SR averages that they have. That's something that I was looking at. We didn't get any preseason footage on that. So I am putting them at my top, but I think as with the rest of the people, the rest of the matches, the teams in this top tier, this is a nebulous situation. These can move and go around as far as, moving up and down this power rankings as we go through the season. But right now I have Storybook Villains at the top, right? Just by what Mysfyt was talking about. There are a lot of good players, and, sometimes, like I said, if you get competitive, you're going to want to win and you're going to play the way you want. Even if you talk a big game that you're not taking things seriously because you're trying to flex on people. We'll see what happens when they get into game, right? I mean, there's a lot of good competition here. Blues Clues and Cats with Hats. Again, don't know a lot about these teams, but I know their SRs are really kind of ranged, but they are scrimming at pretty high levels. And that's why I'm putting them at that top tier. I think unless they're getting rolled in every scrim, I don't know. We'll see. This is something that I'm sure that they have, like, averages for SR can always be pretty misleading sometimes. Obviously, if you ever tried to find a scrim and they claim that they're 3.7, but then they're really just a 3.4 team with a 4.2 hit scan player or something like that because they're a TESPA team or something, you've experienced the misleading information that could be an average SR. So I don't want to put too much stock into that, but right now that's all I have to go with. So we're going to put them there in that top tier. Um, and we'll see what happens, right? And then, of course, Counts MMA Girls, we did get a decent look at them. I think their last game, they were pretty dominant with that roster that they were finally able to flesh out. That's why I'm going to put in there as well. In addition to Monarchy, I think that they're along the lines of Blues Clues and Cats with Hats, scrimming at a little bit higher of a level. And that's why I'm going to put them in that top tier. But they're on the edge. They're on the edge. And when I moved down to the gatekeeper tier, similar to what Mysfyt talked about, these teams are fairly close. And he actually describes SpongeBob as what I think a better version of Everfrost. Um, and that's why I'm putting them here, right? I think that the teams that they will beat are below them, but the teams that they will odd to lose are probably above them, right? So unless some team from the room for improvement tier that I have levels up, they're going to have a trouble trying to play against SpongeBob Mac and Cheese again with the mechanical ability that they have. They were kind of showing off, and as well as Everfrost. Everfrost is playing an equally kind of play style. But again, I think the problems I have with SpongeBob Mac and Cheese is again the defined roles. I think you need to kind of to go through that as well. I think you need to figure those out before they really try and compete with the likes of Storybook Villains and Blues Clues. And then finally, room for improvement tier. This tier again, we saw a couple of games from Absolute Monstrosity this week, this past week. Not a great showing, probably not in top form, but there is a lot of time for improvement. That's why I named it as such. Chinese Monsoon and Barbecue Dad didn't see any in the preseason, but just based on what we have available to us, they're going to be put a little bit lower at the bottom. But this is just going to be bulletin board material for them for the rest of the season. So I'm curious as to see how this list that we have here will evolve over time. But this is what it looks like as it is.
All right, thank you very much. And now we'll get into you, Bowsy. You actually have the color coded tiers,
Yes,
which is
I
very
have the
nice to look at.
I have the color coded tiers, and I have an extra tier in mind, so I'm automatically a step above both of you.
Oh,
So when it
didn't know
comes
that.
to my power rankings, I really decided to put them into the sort of skill compared to the sort of average that we're going to be seeing in this league. Above average, average, below average, and then I have a bottom tier known as bad teams right now. Again, I am, as we've said before, I cannot predict 5 weeks worth of a tournament. I don't know how good you guys are going to be in the long run. Right now, you are not in that position to be in any of these three tiers. In the other three tiers. Starting off with above average, I have Storybook Villains and Blues Clues Bandits, which we've already talked about a lot so far. They seem to be the strongest teams coming into this. Blues Clues Bandits gave a lot of pressure to Bench Boys, and Storybook Villains has a very stacked roster with a bunch of synergy. I think these two are probably going to be fighting for that top spot the most out of all of them. Moving down to the A tier, Monarchy, Council of Anime Girls, and Cats with Hats. Honestly, it's really hard to rank all three of these teams into that sort of category because any of these teams on their best day can beat any of these teams on their worst day. It's really just sort of like a toss-up about where to place all of these. I put Monarchy at the top since they are from Altitude Esports, which is a very high SR rank. And while they are 1 and 3 in Altitude Esports, the fact that they did at least get one win in Altitude Esports says a lot because Altitude Esports is a very competitive league. And I do have an asterisk next to Council Anime Girls because they are the biggest wild card in this entire tournament. I'm sorry, your roster is all over the place, your skill is all over the place, and your macro play is very quirky. So I honestly feel like Council of Anime Girls can be placed anywhere, but I put them in this A tier for now because they do have that strong mechanical showing in Hawk, Blackman, and Abstract coming in this week. So we'll have to see if they're able to keep that tier. Moving on to below average teams, I do have SpongeBob Mac and Cheese and Everfrost, which this does make sense. They kind of are, as Beek said, the gatekeepers of this. They seem to be sort of even in that playing field. But I feel like it's not really shown here, but I feel like there's a big gap between Everfrost and Chinese Monsoon because of one reason and one reason only. And that is, I don't think Chinese Monsoon has had a main tank since the start of this season. Because FineNet has had a broken monitor, they've been unable to really practice with a main tank. I do not know if that is still the case for this team. However, if it is, that means they're going to probably run into a lot of trouble in this season. And finally, I head into the bad teams right now, which are Barbecue Dad and Absolute Monstrosity. These two I have switched a few times recently because I have just been unsure about the position of where they are. On one hand, you have Absolute Monstrosity, which does have Hoopa, and they do have that sort of level coordination, but they just don't have the skill to really bring it out. They have a stable roster, but no real like pop-out players that can help bring them wins. On the other side, you have Barbecue Dad and the Disappointments, which does have pop-out players. They have such players such as McNewbie, Hyper Knight. They have High Quality, who is one of the best Diva players. But they do not have a projectile DPS right now. They have an incomplete roster. And I feel like unless they are able to hitch up a projectile DPS or have one of their 4 tanks learn projectile DPS within the next day, then they are probably going to then they're going to struggle a lot in this league. So really, these two are the worst. These two are the teams that I really cannot place in those 9th and 10th positions, but it only takes a few weeks. If they can improve within these next few weeks, I honestly feel like Barbecue Dad and Absolute Monstrosity can make it into that below average or even make it into the average tier if they're able to work up themselves and become better.
I do want to point out that Clutch Caliber has been grinding the DPS on his stream recently.
Oh,
so
no.
Can't wait to see the Clutch Echo come out in the regular season. That's going to be a fun one to cast.
Bowsy, I like how you skipped the C tier, right? There's the whole teal tier below.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah. Also, I did get confirmation from Finet in the Twitch chat that his monitor is working now. So Chinese Monsoon might actually be able to have like a synergized roster, but I'm still putting them in below average teams because they are obviously haven't been scrimming a lot. And while they do have star players such as Poplots, I don't feel like they're going to be that great of a roster heading into this. But again, prove me wrong. You have 5 weeks.
Yeah. And now I think that'll do it for our power rankings. We're going to get right into our predictions here for the upcoming week of games. I think we had some pretty similar lists, but we're gonna see how things play out right now. Obviously, these are just preseason power rankings, so these are obviously not going to be the same as the end of season power rankings. But let's get into our predictions here. We have a lot of very, very similar ideas here. I don't think did we even pick a different team to win for any of these? I think we all picked the same teams.
You picked a different team for SpongeBob Mac and Cheese versus Chinese Monsoon.
I did.
So
I guess I can talk about that one just a little bit. Again, Chinese Monsoon will be a team that gets better as the season goes on, especially now that they got Pop Plots on the team. Because Pop Plots is just cracked both like mentally and physically. He's got really good mechanics. He's a really smart player, so he'll definitely be able to help this roster improve. But in the early season, I don't think they'll be that good. I think they'll be a team that improves greatly as the season goes on. I think that 3.4 scrim range is not going to last very long. I think they'll get into those Masters ranges pretty quickly here. But at least for the first week, I think they will continue to be a lower tier team. And so I think SpongeBob Mac and Cheese might be able to take it over them. This is kind of just like my like one-off prediction for the week. The rest of these are kind of just like, I don't really need to explain most of these. I pretty much just pick the team higher on my power rankings to win. So yeah, that's my opinion for this one. I think Chinese Monsoon will be able to, or actually, wait. I thought I picked SpongeBob Mac and Cheese over Chinese Monsoon. I guess I didn't. Interesting. That was a very long-winded discussion about me just finding an incorrect pick.
Now you have clear, and now you have a clear rooting interest for Chinese Monsoon to be able to be right. There you go.
I see. the accidental bold pick strat happens more often than you think.
No, that way when they do win, you're like, see, that was a giant brain, 400 IQ, exactly. But what the only big differences I think we had is, for me, I think we all picked, like you said, picked the same things, but just certain map differentials. Like I think you guys were giving me a little crap because I gave I gave Barbecue and Dad 2 maps off of Everest, I think, to go into a full map 5. And I think I did that because I want to see some life out of Barbecue here, right? I think we've talked a little bit about them. We've put them all at the lowest levels of our power rankings. But they, at least from my perspective, haven't seen anything about them. So I want to see some life from them, some fight from them against Everfrost, which has been a little bit, kind of very unstable here, I think, going so far. So this could be wrong, but we'll see.
Yeah, and obviously I'm not one for 3-0s. As you can tell, I really do not like when matches are 3-0s. I like to have that sort of competition, and that's why I have these sort of like 3-1s you see a lot of, because I honestly feel like, yes, this is a league where we have like some teams that are like very high Masters and some teams that are not that high or in Masters or even in Diamond. But I do feel like with the right pieces and with the right map picks and even with the right mechanical skill, anyone can win a map in this. You're not going to lose every single map, and you are not going to lose every single match. I honestly feel like everyone has a chance to win in this tournament, regardless of if it's just one map or if it's the entire season. So that's why I usually try to go for 1 and 3s in most of mine. Obviously, some of them I had to go for 3 and 0s, like Absolute Monstrosity games and Barbecue Dad and the Disappointments games. I'm sorry, but regardless, I do feel like that anyone can take a map off at any point. But who knows? We'll have to see what happens on Friday and Sunday and Saturday.
Yeah, I do want to point out something that I'm very excited for. The first day, as you can see from my predictions, I don't really think there's going to be any close games. Just based on the differences in the teams that play. Most of the teams, there's a very clear this team is like played at a higher rank than the other team, right? Most of these there's a very very big difference between these teams, right? But day 2 is actually going to have some really close matchups between the teams in my contenders series. BCB is going to play Monarchy. I'm really excited for that one. That's going to either cement or prove my belief wrong about whether or not BCB is a top team. And then, of course, SBV is going to be able to play Cats with Hats. And we're going to get to see if that memeable strategy that SBV is going to run with is actually going to work against a top team in the league. So I'm really excited for day 2 matches. I think the one match that I'm really excited for is going to be Council of Anime Girls versus Barbecue Dad. That's not going to be like a really high-profile game, but the reason I'm excited for it is it's going to be the only run back Blackman and Hawk get against the former Crusaders rosters from 3.5 finals. For those of you that were unaware, there were some unfortunate circumstances in that game, such as our off-tank being unavailable because of his internet, and our star DPS player Hawk being unavailable after map 5 because he had to go pick up his fiance. Screw him for having a loving relationship, but we all know Overwatch comes first, right?
Man,
boys?
how dare real life things get in the way?
That's how dare he, honestly.
How dare!
But yeah, no, that's gonna be the closest thing they get to a rematch of 3.5 grand finals. Not exactly the same team, but I really hope that they can get the closure they deserve from that game, because I know all the Bench Boys players were not very pleased with how that match ended in 3.5. But yeah, that's what does it for my Preds. Do you guys have anything else to add?
I do want to run it back real quick to what you were talking about, Monarchy versus Blues Clues Bandits. All of us have that game at a 2-3 score line. We obviously feel like that these teams are going to be close, but Monarchy really could take a victory over Blues Clues Bandits there, and it really is going to be determining about how Blues Clues Bandits is. And also, I just want to bring attention, because I ended up seeing something in the Twitch chat. Silent Marine asked, which match do we think has the biggest upset potential? I'm going to be honest. Storybook Villains versus Cats with Hats might be the biggest upset potential next to Monarchy versus Blues Clues Bandits, because those teams seem to be in that sort of like top tier, but also not top tier. It'll be interesting to see if Storybook Villains will take it that seriously against Cats with Hats. And if they don't, if Cats with Hats are able to act upon that and take the match for themselves.
I personally think it's Barbecue Dad versus Everfrost. We talked about how absolutely dominant McNewbie is. If you don't believe me, go watch Map 7 of Grand Finals, where he decided that the only reason we lost Map 7 of Grand Finals is because McNewbie decided he wanted to stop playing Overwatch, and so he stopped missing his shots. That was not a very fun map for us to play. We kind of got dominated. But we talked about Everfrost has decent DPS players. I think McNewbie's better than them. So if McNewbie comes with his carry pants on and he starts popping off on the win on those hitscan players that he's known for, I definitely think Barbecue Dad can take it over Everfrost. But obviously right now I'm gonna go with the safe pick before I know more about what Barbecue, because I haven't seen Barbecue Dad in since 3.5 finals. I can't make any predictions on how good they are. I'm solely going off of like just random things that I know for them. But I definitely think they have the potential to pull out that match. All right. Any final words to add before we throw it to a quick break?
Yeah, one thing, quick plug. I'll be the one casting the Chinese Monsoon versus the BCB tomorrow night at 8 p.m. So definitely, guys, come and check out. Maybe it won't be a stomp, and let's hope it's not. Let's hope it'll be a close game.
All right. Yes, definitely do come check out our productions. We will be streaming, I believe, 3 matches from day 1. I think one of them will be on Saturday, though, so it probably will be only 2 tomorrow. But we will have the Coag versus BBQ game and the BCB versus Chinese Monsoon game, like you said. So yeah, definitely come check that out. But for now, we're going to throw it to a quick break. We got a very special surprise coming up right after this. This has been episode 1 of The Nest. Thank you all for coming out. mean, you all know what's happening right now. I didn't even need to say it. I could say it was a special surprise, but every single one of you knew it was coming back. It's the Mysfyt metric. We're coming back at it again. I will announce a couple of changes to this. There were some issues last year with how I did this. For those of you that don't know, for those of you that are new to Owlet, this is a statistic that I put together and named after myself because of my massive ego, according to Twitch chat. But it basically, I didn't really think that average SR was a very good way to rank teams. And the reason behind that is because I played for a team back in the day called Ohio OOs, and we were like a 3.2 average team, but we played in a tournament and we were like smoking 3.6 teams, right? And so that's kind of like where it really hit me as a player. Like SR doesn't mean anything. So I didn't want to just rank teams in the preseason based off of SR. I wanted to factor in other factors. So the way I did it last year is I took their average SR plus the peak SR of their best player plus their scrim range, and then I got a number based on that and called it the Mysfyt metric. We're changing that up just a little bit this year. I'm no longer taking into account the average SR of the best player. That was a very platinum opinion of me to do because that's not a very good way to measure carry potential of one player because I'm still going based off of SR. If I was going to do that, I would have to go based on like a stats number that I would calculate. And frankly, I just don't have the time to do that. So we're just taking it out of the metric. It's simply just going to be the SR plus the scrim range. And then I'm averaging that to find a number that we dubbed the Mysfyt metric. So here are the raw numbers here. I use the sign up sheet SR to go based off that. So if you're on a team and you're looking at your average SR right now and it doesn't really make sense to you, well, if some of your players have ranked up here in the last week and really like blown past their peaks, that would have an impact on that. This is solely based off of the SR you had when you signed up. I apologize if it's not perfectly accurate, but it's as close as I can get. The SR scrim ranges, again, if you've upped your scrim range recently, I don't know anything about that. I tried to check. I checked yesterday to make sure that it was all the same. But this is the most updated version that I could find. And so I used it for my calculations. I want to make it very clear right now, this is mostly meant to be for fun. It's kind of a predictive measure, but not really. We already did our power ranking segment. This is mostly just like a fun stats thing that I wanted to do for the league. So we can get into the actual ranking sheet now if my producer wants to chuck it over to that screen. And we can see how these teams kind of stack up against each other and a little bit more. So here you have the rankings. It's pretty similar to how the power rankings went off. Obviously, all the analysts, including myself, factored in the scrim range and average SR when we were making our power rankings. So it does look pretty similar to some of our power rankings, but it's not perfectly one-to-one. We did have some other opinions there. As you can see, we have SBV on top, and that just comes down to they have, a very, very high SR average and a very, very high scrim range. This doesn't factor into account what I said about their memeable strategy where they're playing comfort picks. If they do try, they do look to be one of the most solid teams in the division here. Then we got Blues Clues, Cats with Hats, Monarchy, Council. You can see the list right there. And yeah, these are just like the number isn't meant to be like predictive or anything. It mostly is just a way of like giving them. This is like a more accurate version of their average SR, right? Think of this number, the Mysfyt metric, as being the SR of these teams, not their average SR, because we have teams, like Monarchy, who we saw on the last slide. They're a 3.4 average team, but they scrim 3.9 to 4K, right? So if we just went based off their average SR, it wouldn't really make a lot of sense because they don't really perform at a 3.4 level, do they? So we can see how it really messes up here. I wanted to show the difference from like the next person in line to try to show like the difference in skill between the teams here. The average difference in SR between these teams is about 73.7 SR, which is not that much. It's lower than what we had in season 3.5. Basically what this means is that there's about 100 SR difference between these teams when they play. And that again, not meant to be predictive. Could be a completely BS statistic, mostly meant for fun. But I still think it's a fun thing to calculate here and show how close these teams are. We have the difference for number one. We get to see the teams that are like pretty close to SBV and the teams that are kind of far away. Obviously, Barbecue Dad and Absolute Monstrosity, they're at the bottom, which I know High Quality is not going to be happy about. He has a lot to say about my Mysfyt metric. I'm sure he'll hit my DMs later tonight. But then I also wanted to compare it to the average SR and show like the how much it really like boosts how much it shows how much better they are when you factor in the scrim range to their average SR and not just the average SR. But actually, I came across a very fun statistic. A lot of the teams in Owlet Season 3.9 actually happen to scrim below their average SR. So instead of, adding the Mysfyt metric, adding SR to their average SR, them away because they aren't scrimming to the level that their SR is, which I thought was kind of interesting. You can see the four teams there at the bottom: SpongeBob, Mac and Cheese, Chinese Monsoon, Barbecue Dad, and Absolute Monstrosity all scrim below their SR average. So, well, actually, Barbecue Dad scrims exactly at their SR average, which I thought was actually really funny. So, then we get to see the average difference there between like the average SR and the Mysfyt metric. There's an average difference of 71.8 SR. So that basically just means that these teams all perform at a level 71.8 SR above what they show in their average SR, which of course, again, this is meant for fun, not to be predictive. That may or may not be true. I just think it looks cool. And then the last thing I want to talk about here for the Mysfyt metric is about how we're going to update it. Last season, I had a whole way about how I was going to update the metrics. I had a whole maps are worth this, games are worth this, forfeits are worth this, all this jazz that was going on there, right? But a big complaint that I got from that was that because the Mysfyt metric changes so often based on how the players, like the average SR and the scrim SR ranges, can change so often that it doesn't make sense to update that number. So what I'll be doing is I'll just be doing a typical ELO system. I'm going to find the average player SR of Owlet 3.9, and I'm going to start every team there, and I'm just going to update it based off of that. There'll be more information on that next week. It's not going to be called the Mysfyt metric. It'll be something completely different. So this is where the Mysfyt metric dies for this season. I wanted to bring this back as kind of a callback to 3.5, and I wanted to, poke fun at a couple of my old friends from the old days with this one, but don't treat this as anything too serious. The power rankings were much more serious than this would be. This would just be a fun segment that we had at the end here. But yeah, no, that's gonna do it here for the first episode of the Nest. I have been your host, Nestfit, and I'm really excited that you all came out here. I hope to put on more of this again, and again, watch our matches, see if our predictions were actually correct. We made a lot of bold claims about some teams. But it's just preseason. And as we had some people saying in chat, only 4 of the 10 teams have played. So we really don't know how these teams stack up yet. These are all just, speculation. I'm really excited to see what actually happens when you get into the regular season. And I know you guys are too. So don't go anywhere. We're going to have games here tomorrow, Saturday, and Sunday. So going to be a lot of fun. And I hope to see you guys at all of them. Peace out.